My name is Valerie. I am 34 years old, and I work as a senior corporate event director for a global technology firm. My entire profession is dedicated to the absolute control of logistics, optics, and crowd psychology. I spend my days managing million-dollar budgets, coordinating thousands of guests, and ensuring that the spotlight lands exactly where it is supposed to land at the exact right millisecond. In event planning, you learn a very specific truth about human behavior. The most dangerous person in a room is never the angry guest or the stressed caterer. The most dangerous person is the narcissist who realizes the spotlight is not currently shining on them. So, when I sat in a velvet chair at the center of a country club ballroom, surrounded by 60 of my closest friends and family members for my own baby shower, I recognized the signs immediately. I heard the sharp, metallic clinking of a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute. I watched the crowd fall silent and turn their heads, and I watched my sister-in-law, Chloe, stand up, smooth down her designer dress, and hijack the most important day of my life to announce her own pregnancy. I did not scream. I did not burst into tears and run out of the ballroom. I did not throw my beautifully wrapped gifts across the floor. I simply placed my hands over my 7-month pregnant belly, smiled a terrifyingly calm smile, and watched my husband and his family abandon my celebration to flock around her. They thought I was being a gracious, compliant host. They thought I had accepted my permanent role as the background character in Chloe's theatrical life. They did not know that by stealing my stage, Chloe had just handed the microphone to an event director who was going to orchestrate her absolute, total public destruction. Welcome back to Family Drama Files, where we tell quiet, true-to-life stories about deep betrayal, methodical justice, and the exact moment someone stops shrinking to accommodate the toxic, cowardly people in their lives. If you have ever had a family member who constantly stole your joy and a partner who lacked the spine to defend your boundaries, this story is for you. Drop a comment below to let me know where you are listening from, and be sure to subscribe. To understand the absolute, staggering cruelty of what Chloe did at my baby shower, you have to understand the agonizing road it took for me to get pregnant, and the lifetime of unchecked vanity that my husband's family permitted. I met my husband, Mark, when we were 25 years old. Mark was a kind, easygoing man who worked in corporate finance. He avoided conflict at all costs, which, early in our relationship, I mistook for a peaceful demeanor. It was only later that I realized Mark's peace was purchased entirely by appeasing the 2 women who controlled his life. His mother, Susan, and his younger sister, Chloe. Chloe is 3 years younger than Mark, but she operates as the undisputed center of the family universe. She is the textbook definition of a golden child, vain, relentlessly competitive, and fundamentally incapable of allowing anyone else to experience a moment of unshared joy. Susan, their mother, enabled this behavior completely. Whenever Chloe acted out, Susan would wave a dismissive hand and say, "Oh, Chloe is just highly spirited. Let her have her moment, she just gets so excited." I learned about Chloe's spotlight-stealing tendencies very early in my relationship with Mark. When I graduated with my master's degree in event management, my parents hosted a beautiful dinner for me at a high-end restaurant. Mark invited his family. Right as the dessert was being served and my father stood up to give a toast to my academic achievements, Chloe suddenly stood up, burst into loud, theatrical tears, and announced that she and her boyfriend had just gotten engaged in the parking lot. My father's toast was entirely forgotten. The rest of the evening was spent admiring Chloe's diamond ring. When Mark and I got married 3 years later, Chloe threw a tantrum because I did not select her to be my maid of honor. In retaliation, she arrived at my wedding wearing a floor-length white lace gown that looked suspiciously like a bridal dress. When I asked Mark to say something to her, he looked at his shoes and mumbled, "Valerie, please do not make a scene. It is just a dress. She is just trying to look nice for the photos." I swallowed my anger. I kept the peace. I told myself that once Mark and I started our own family, we would establish firmer boundaries. But starting our family became the greatest, most devastating battle of my life. When I was 29 years old, Mark and I began trying to conceive. Month after month, year after year, we were met with negative tests. We went to specialists. I underwent grueling, invasive procedures. I was diagnosed with a severe fertility issue that made natural conception nearly impossible. The emotional toll was catastrophic. For 4 entire years, my life was a relentless, agonizing cycle of hormone injections, doctor appointments, and profound, crushing grief. We drained our savings account. We maxed out our credit cards to afford 3 separate rounds of in vitro fertilization. The first round failed. I cried on the bathroom floor for 2 days. The second round ended in a devastating loss at 8 weeks. Throughout this entire 4-year nightmare, Chloe was entirely unsympathetic. She would casually complain at family dinners about how annoying children were, or make passive-aggressive comments about how lucky I was to be able to focus on my career instead of ruining my body with a baby. Susan, the matriarch, would simply sigh and tell me to pray more, as if my medical condition was a moral failing. But finally, on our 3rd and final round of in vitro fertilization, by some absolute medical miracle, it worked. I was pregnant. The pregnancy held, the numbers doubled perfectly, and we crossed the dreaded 12-week safety mark. We were having a little girl. The joy I felt was indescribable. It was like breathing pure oxygen after drowning for 4 years. Mark wept in the doctor's office. I thought, finally, the darkness was over. We had won. Because of my profession as an event director, I wanted my baby shower to be flawless. I did not want a casual backyard barbecue. I wanted to celebrate this hard-fought miracle with a beautiful, elegant afternoon. I booked the sunroom of a gorgeous historic country club. I paid for catered high tea, stunning floral arrangements, and a string duo. My mother and my best friends helped me design every single detail. The guest list included 60 women, my family, my college friends, my professional colleagues, and Mark's female relatives, including Susan and Chloe. The shower took place on a crisp Saturday afternoon in early October. I was 7 months pregnant, wearing a beautiful blush pink maternity dress. For the first 2 hours, the event was perfect. The food was exquisite, the music was soft, and I felt surrounded by genuine, overwhelming love. Then came the time to open the gifts. I was seated in a large, velvet chair in the center of the room. The guests were seated in a semicircle around me. I had just opened a handmade quilt stitched by my late grandmother, a gift my mother had kept hidden in a cedar chest for 10 years specifically for this moment. I was crying happy tears, holding the quilt against my chest, and the room was filled with a soft, emotional silence. It was the most vulnerable, beautiful moment of my life. And that is exactly when Chloe realized she had not been the center of attention for 2 entire hours. I heard the sharp, metallic clinking of a silver spoon against crystal. Clink, clink, clink. I looked up. Chloe was standing near the mimosa bar. She was wearing a skin-tight, emerald green dress. She held her glass high in the air, a massive, brilliant smile plastered across her face. Excuse me, everyone." Chloe's voice echoed loudly across the sunroom, completely shattering the quiet, emotional atmosphere. "I know we are all here to celebrate Valerie and Mark's little IVF baby, but I actually have a very special announcement of my own, and since the whole family is already gathered here, I just could not wait another minute to share it." My heart stopped. The blood rushed out of my face. I gripped the arms of the velvet chair, my knuckles turning white. "Greg and I are pregnant," Chloe squealed, throwing her free hand into the air. "We are 9 weeks along. We got pregnant on our very first try. We are going to have a baby." The room froze for a fraction of a second, the guests collectively holding their breath, deeply uncomfortable with the sheer, unprecedented lack of etiquette. But Susan, my mother-in-law, let out a loud, theatrical shriek of absolute delight. "Oh my God!" Susan screamed, leaping out of her chair and rushing across the room. "A baby! Chloe is having a baby. My beautiful girl is going to be a mother." Susan threw her arms around Chloe, weeping loudly. And just like that, the dam broke. The etiquette in the room collapsed. Half of the guests, Mark's side of the family, stood up and swarmed around the mimosa bar, abandoning their seats to hug and congratulate Chloe. The noise level in the room skyrocketed. Women were asking Chloe about her due date, asking if she had morning sickness, asking what names she had picked out. I sat completely alone in the center of the room. The handmade quilt from my dead grandmother slipped off my lap and onto the floor. I looked over at the doorway. Mark had been standing near the entrance, chatting with a few of the husbands who had come to help load the gifts. I locked eyes with my husband. I waited for him to step in. I waited for him to walk over to his sister, pull her aside, and tell her how incredibly inappropriate and cruel it was to hijack a shower that celebrated 4 years of agonizing medical trauma. Mark looked at me, he looked at Chloe, and then my husband smiled, walked over to the mimosa bar, and hugged his sister. "Congratulations, Chloe," I heard Mark say over the noise. "That is awesome news." In my profession, when a highly coordinated event spirals out of control, you experience a moment of hyper-focused clarity. Time slows down. You assess the structural failures, you identify the weak points, and you calculate the exact strategy required to regain control of the room. Sitting in that velvet chair, watching my husband celebrate the woman who had just stolen my miracle, the last remaining thread of my loyalty to his family snapped. It was a clean, silent, absolute break. I did not cry. I did not stand up and demand everyone sit back down. I simply folded my hands over my pregnant stomach, closed my eyes for 3 seconds, and took a deep breath. My best friend, Sarah, rushed over to my chair. Her face was red with pure, unadulterated fury. "Valerie," Sarah whispered fiercely, her voice shaking, "do you want me to throw her out? I will physically drag her out of this country club by her hair. Just give me the word." "No, Sarah," I replied, my voice completely smooth and detached. "Do not cause a scene. Let her have the room." "Valerie, she just hijacked your shower," Sarah hissed. "After everything you went through, it is sick." "I know," I said, opening my eyes and looking directly at Chloe, who was currently laughing loudly and posing for a photo with Susan. "But ruining her announcement today only makes me look like a bitter, hormonal, pregnant woman. I am an event director, Sarah. If I am going to destroy her, I am going to do it on my own stage, with my own lighting, and with a fully scripted program." I stood up from the chair. I picked up my grandmother's quilt, folded it neatly, and walked over to the mimosa bar. I smiled a brilliant, completely empty smile. I hugged Chloe. I told her congratulations. I played the role of the gracious, supportive sister-in-law so perfectly that even Susan looked slightly surprised. The rest of the baby shower was a blur of Chloe talking about her symptoms and showing everyone her microscopic ultrasound photo on her phone. I paid the caterer, tipped the string duo, and let Mark drive me home. In the car, Mark patted my leg. "That was a great party, Val. And wow, what crazy news about Chloe, right? 2 babies in the family in 1 year. Mom is going to be thrilled." I looked out the passenger window at the passing trees. "Yes, Mark, it is very exciting. You are not mad she announced it today, are you?" Mark asked nervously, sensing the absolute 0-degree temperature radiating from my side of the car. "I know it was your day, but you know how Chloe is. She just gets so excited. It was actually kind of nice to share the celebration, right?" "I am not mad, Mark," I lied flawlessly. "I think it is perfectly fitting." 2 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl named Lily. The birth was difficult, but holding my daughter erased every single memory of the needles, the failed tests, and the grief. For the first month of her life, I lived in a bubble of pure love. I focused entirely on my child, my healing, and my own peace. But Chloe, true to her nature, could not tolerate the family's attention being diverted to a newborn. When Lily was exactly 6 weeks old, Susan called a mandatory Sunday family dinner at her house. Mark and I packed the diaper bag and brought Lily over. We had barely sat down at the dining room table before Chloe stood up, tapped her water glass, and cleared her throat. She was now 4 months pregnant, her stomach barely showing, but she stood with her hands dramatically cradling her abdomen. "Attention, everyone," Chloe announced, beaming. "Greg and I just got our genetic blood test results back. We are so excited to announce that we are having a boy, the very first grandson of the family." Susan burst into happy tears, immediately rushing to hug Chloe. "A boy, a little boy to carry on the family name. Oh, this is the most wonderful news." I sat at the table, bouncing Lily on my knee, completely unfazed by the performance. "And," Chloe continued, her voice rising over the congratulations, looking directly at me with a sickeningly sweet smile. Since I am having the first boy, Greg and I have decided we want a truly spectacular, high-end baby shower. Nothing basic. We want a luxury, influencer-style event. And since Valerie is currently on maternity leave and has all this free time, we thought it would be absolutely perfect if Valerie planned it for us. The room fell silent. Mark looked at me, his eyes wide, silently begging me to agree to keep the peace. Susan clasped her hands together. "Oh, Valerie, that is a brilliant idea. You are a professional event director. You know all the best vendors. It would be such a beautiful bonding experience for you two, and it would save Chloe so much stress. You will do it, will you not? For family." They were asking the woman whose baby shower they ruined, who is currently 6 weeks postpartum and recovering from a difficult birth, to work for free to plan a luxury gala for the golden child. I looked at Chloe. I looked at the smug, entitled smirk resting on her face. She thought she was establishing dominance. She thought she was forcing the professional event planner to act as her unpaid servant. She had absolutely no idea what she had just done. I smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile that did not reach my eyes. "Of course, Chloe," I said smoothly, shifting my daughter in my arms. "I would be absolutely honored to plan your baby shower. I promise you, it will be an event that this family will never, ever forget." When I agreed to plan Chloe's baby shower, my mother-in-law, Susan, let out a loud sigh of relief, clearly thrilled that she did not have to pay for a professional planner out of her own pocket. Mark gave me a grateful, pathetic little smile from across the table, thrilled that he had successfully avoided another conflict. And Chloe practically vibrated with triumphant entitlement. She had successfully recruited a senior corporate event director to act as her unpaid personal assistant. She spent the rest of the dinner detailing exactly how she wanted the event to look. An influencer-style boho chic aesthetic, a massive balloon arch, a catered champagne brunch, and a professional photographer to ensure her social media feed was flawless. "I will handle all the logistics, Chloe," I assured her as we were leaving. "I just need you to send me the guest list, the email addresses for the digital invitations, and a budget limit for the venue and the vendors." Chloe waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, do not worry about a strict budget, Val. Greg just got a massive promotion at his firm. We want top tier. Just send the invoices to his email and he will take care of the payments." "Top tier," I repeated smoothly. "Understood." When we got home, I put my daughter Lily to sleep in her crib. I walked into my home office, booted up my laptop, and opened a fresh, encrypted event management file. I titled it Project Icarus. In the corporate world, when a high-profile client gives an event director an unlimited budget and total control over the vendor list, it is a display of absolute trust. It means the client trusts the director not to exploit them and not to uncover the dirty secrets hiding in their financial background. Chloe had just handed me the keys to her entire life. The first step in planning any massive event is establishing the financial pipeline. 2 days later, I contacted my preferred luxury vendors: a boutique country club venue, a high-end organic caterer, a bespoke floral designer, and a top-tier photographer. I requested preliminary quotes and forwarded the invoices directly to Greg's email address, exactly as Chloe had instructed. The total for the deposits was roughly $8,000. 24 hours later, the vendors contacted me. Every single credit card transaction Greg had attempted to run had declined. I frowned, staring at my computer screen. Chloe had explicitly bragged at the Sunday dinner about Greg's massive promotion. A man with a massive promotion and an unlimited budget does not bounce an $8,000 charge across 4 different credit cards. I called Greg directly. He did not answer. He sent a text message an hour later, claiming his bank had flagged the transactions as fraud because they were out of state, and promised to wire the funds manually the next day. The wire transfers never arrived. Instead, a week later, I received an email from Susan. "Hi, Valerie," Susan wrote. "Chloe told me there was a silly technical issue with Greg's corporate cards. I went ahead and paid the vendor deposits myself. Do not tell Greg. He is so proud and it would embarrass him. Let us just keep this between us girls. Cannot wait for the shower." I leaned back in my office chair. The situation was beginning to smell incredibly foul. Greg was a man who drove a leased luxury sports car, wore $1,000 watches, and talked loudly at family events about his portfolio. But he could not clear an $8,000 vendor deposit, and his mother-in-law was secretly covering his tracks to protect his ego. In my profession, when vendor payments bounce and the client lies about it, you do not just shrug and move on. You do a quiet, internal audit to ensure you are not tying your professional reputation to a fraudulent entity. I picked up my phone and called a favor. One of my closest friends from college, a woman named Rachel, is a senior forensic accountant who specializes in corporate asset recovery. She is brilliant, ruthless, and owes me deeply for planning her elaborate wedding for free 3 years ago. "Rachel," I said when she answered, "I need a quiet background check. Financials, civil judgments, and corporate affiliations. The target is Greg Miller. He claims to be a senior portfolio manager at Vanguard Capital." "Give me 24 hours, Rachel promised. She called me back the next afternoon. Her tone was not lighthearted. It was the tone of a woman who had just opened a very dark closet. "Valerie," Rachel said slowly, "your brother-in-law is not a senior portfolio manager at Vanguard Capital." "What is he?" I asked, pulling out a legal pad and a pen. "He is unemployed," Rachel stated flatly. "He was fired from Vanguard 8 months ago for gross misconduct. According to the civil filings, he was caught running an unauthorized, unsanctioned cryptocurrency scheme using company servers. They quietly let him go with a severance package in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement to avoid a public scandal." I stopped writing. 8 months ago. That meant Greg had been unemployed since before Chloe even got pregnant. "It gets worse," Rachel continued. "Greg has leveraged himself to the absolute hilt. He has 2 massive personal loans taken out against their house, and he is 90 days delinquent on his sports car lease. But the most interesting thing I found is a recently formed limited liability company registered in his name." "A shell company?" I asked. "Yes," Rachel confirmed. "It is registered under the name Miller Holdings LLC. And Valerie, the primary funding source for this LLC, a series of wire transfers totaling over $200,000, came directly from a joint savings account owned by your husband, Mark, and his mother, Susan." The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. My heart began to hammer a cold, terrifying rhythm against my ribs. When Mark and I got married, we kept our primary finances separate due to my high income, but we maintained a joint checking account for household expenses. However, Mark had always told me he kept a separate, legacy savings account, jointly with his mother, containing the inheritance his late grandfather had left him. Mark explicitly told me this money was a safety net, an untouched emergency fund that would eventually be used for our child's college tuition. He had sworn to me that he never touched it. "Rachel," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "are you telling me that my husband wired $200,000 of his inheritance to his unemployed brother-in-law's shell company?" "I am looking at the public filing documents right now, Val," Rachel said quietly. "The transfer was executed 5 months ago. Greg used the LLC to purchase a massive stake in a highly volatile, completely unregulated overseas crypto exchange. The exchange collapsed 3 weeks ago. The money is gone. Vaporized." I hung up the phone. I sat in the absolute silence of my home office, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing of my daughter sleeping in her bassinet in the next room. My husband had secretly handed our daughter's college fund to a con artist. He had done it without telling me. And he had done it because his mother, Susan, undoubtedly pressured him to invest in Greg's new venture to help Chloe maintain her fake, luxury lifestyle after Greg was fired. Mark, Susan, Chloe, and Greg, they were all in on it. They had formed a toxic, incestuous circle of financial fraud and lies, and they had kept me entirely in the dark. And now, Chloe was demanding that I plan a luxury baby shower for her, funded by the very woman who helped steal my daughter's future. I did not scream. I did not walk out into the living room and confront Mark. Confrontation is a messy, emotional release that tips off the enemy and gives them time to hire lawyers and move assets. When you discover that the foundation of your marriage is built on financial fraud, You do not throw a tantrum. You secure the perimeter, you gather the blueprints, and you wire the building for a controlled demolition. I opened the Project Icarus file on my laptop. I no longer viewed Chloe's baby shower as a family obligation. I viewed it as the perfect, public stage for an absolute massacre. For the next 4 weeks, I played the role of the devoted, enthusiastic event planner flawlessly. I smiled at Sunday dinners. I kissed Mark on the cheek. I texted Chloe daily with updates on the floral arrangements and the menu tastings. Behind the scenes, I was meticulously constructing the trap. First, I needed absolute, legally undeniable proof of Mark's involvement in the wire transfer. I waited until Mark went to play golf on a Saturday morning. I logged into his laptop, bypassed his laughably weak password, and accessed his secure email. I found the emails between Mark, Susan, and Greg. Greg had written 5 months ago. The crypto exchange is going public next month. If you and Susan wire the $200,000 from the legacy account now, I guarantee a triple return by Christmas. Do not tell Valerie. She is too conservative with investments. She will not understand the vision. Mark's reply was sent an hour later. Greg, Mom said you needed the cash to float Chloe's lifestyle until your new firm takes off. I authorized the wire. Keep this quiet. If Valerie finds out I drained the emergency fund, she will leave me. I downloaded the entire email chain, the wire transfer confirmation receipts, and the public filings of Greg's failed LLC. I printed them, made 4 physical copies, and stored them in a fireproof safe at my office. Next, I needed to ensure that the audience for Chloe's baby shower was maximized. Chloe had given me a guest list of 60 women. I smiled at the list and immediately expanded it. I contacted Chloe, feigning concern. Chloe, the venue has a minimum capacity requirement for the ballroom we selected. We need at least 100 guests to keep the reservation. Would it be all right if we made this a co-ed shower? We can invite Mark, Greg, your uncles, and Greg's entire extended family and former colleagues. Chloe, absolutely thrilled at the prospect of a larger audience to witness her triumph, agreed instantly. She sent me 40 more names, including Greg's former boss at Vanguard Capital, his wealthy parents, and a dozen high society friends she desperately wanted to impress. The stage was set. The audience was secured. The evidence was printed. The day of the baby shower arrived. It was a brilliant, sunny Saturday in late spring. I arrived at the country club 3 hours early to oversee the setup. The ballroom looked spectacular. There were towering arrangements of white orchids and pampas grass. A massive, custom-built balloon arch framed an ornate wicker peacock chair where Chloe would sit to open her gifts. Champagne flutes were lined up on silver trays. I had also made one very specific, unusual logistical request to the venue manager. I need a large, high-definition projector screen lowered directly behind the gift chair, I instructed the manager, handing him a sealed USB drive. And I need the audio hooked directly into the ballroom's surround sound system. When I give you the signal from the floor, I need you to play the presentation on this drive immediately. Do not pause it for any reason. The manager, assuming it was a sweet slideshow of baby photos, nodded and set up the equipment. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the guests began to arrive. The room filled with 100 of the wealthiest, most influential people in Chloe and Greg's social circle. Mark arrived carrying a stack of beautifully wrapped gifts, completely unaware that his life was about to end. Susan arrived wearing a hideous, sequined pantsuit, preening as if she were the one giving birth. And then, Chloe made her grand entrance. She wore a skin-tight, white lace maternity dress. She walked into the ballroom holding Greg's hand, posing for the professional photographer I had hired, soaking in the applause and the cheers of the crowd. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. I greeted her with a warm smile, handing her a glass of sparkling cider. You look beautiful, Chloe. The chair is ready for you whenever you want to begin the gifts. Thank you, Val, Chloe said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. You really outdid yourself. It is almost as nice as the shower you had. It is just so much better with a bigger crowd, do you not think? It is definitely going to be memorable, I agreed smoothly. For the first 2 hours, The event went exactly according to the traditional script. The guests ate the expensive catered food. They drank the champagne Susan had secretly paid for. They played tedious baby shower games. At exactly 3:30 in the afternoon, I picked up a microphone. "Attention, everyone," I announced, my voice carrying clearly over the chatter. "If I could have everyone take their seats, it is time for the main event. Chloe and Greg, please make your way to the front of the room." The crowd cheered. Chloe, beaming with absolute vanity, waddled to the front of the room and sat in the ornate wicker peacock chair. Greg stood next to her, puffing out his chest, playing the role of the successful, wealthy provider. Susan and Mark took seats in the very front row, clapping loudly. I stood off to the side of the stage, holding the microphone. I looked at the crowd. I saw Greg's wealthy parents. I saw his former boss. I saw Susan's country club friends. "We are all here today to celebrate Chloe and Greg," I began, my voice perfectly modulated, adopting the tone of a professional presenter. "A couple who has built a life on appearances, on grand gestures, and on the absolute, unwavering financial support of their family." A few people chuckled, assuming it was a light-hearted joke. "When Chloe asked me to plan this event," I continued, pacing slowly across the floor, "she told me money was no object. She told me Greg had received a massive promotion. She wanted a luxury experience to match their luxury lifestyle. And as an event director, it is my job to deliver the truth behind the aesthetic." I paused. The room went slightly quiet, the guests sensing a sudden, bizarre shift in the tone of my speech. Chloe's smile faltered slightly. She looked at Greg. Greg frowned, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. "Unfortunately," I said, dropping the polite smile entirely, my face hardening into a mask of cold, unyielding granite. "When you plan an event of this magnitude, you have to verify the funding. And when the credit cards decline, you have to find out why." Greg's face instantly drained of all color. He realized exactly where this was going. He took a step toward me, raising his hand. "Valerie, what are you doing? Give me the microphone." "I am doing my job, Greg," I said, stepping back out of his reach. I looked directly at the venue manager standing in the sound booth at the back of the room. I gave the signal. The massive, high-definition projector screen lowered from the ceiling, directly behind Chloe's peacock chair. The room fell into an absolute, breathless, terrified silence. The projector clicked on. It did not show baby photos. It did not show ultrasound pictures. Displayed in massive, glowing text, 10 feet high and completely undeniable, was the official civil filing of Greg Miller's termination from Vanguard Capital for gross misconduct and unauthorized cryptocurrency trading. The silence in the country club ballroom was profound. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that occurs right before a massive structural collapse. 100 wealthy, elite guests stopped breathing simultaneously. The string duo in the corner abruptly stopped playing. Chloe, sitting in the ornate peacock chair directly beneath the screen, looked over her shoulder. She saw the word "terminated" highlighted in bright red across the massive projection. She saw the date of the filing, 8 months ago. "Valerie!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking in pure, unadulterated panic. She scrambled out of the chair, tripping over the hem of her white lace dress. Turn that off right now." "Greg, what is that?" Greg did not answer her. He was staring at the screen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. His wealthy parents, sitting in the second row, looked absolutely horrified. His former boss from Vanguard Capital, sitting near the back, crossed his arms over his chest, his face dark with anger. I did not turn it off. I raised the microphone. "As you can see," I announced to the room, my voice calm, analytical, and entirely devoid of pity, "Greg did not receive a massive promotion. Greg has been unemployed for 8 months. He was fired for utilizing company servers to run an illegal crypto scheme before Chloe even became pregnant." "Liar!" Susan screamed, leaping up from the front row. The matriarch's face was flushed a dangerous, mottled red. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You jealous, bitter woman, you doctored those papers. Mark, do something, stop your wife." Mark stood up. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate pleading. "Val, please stop. You are ruining the shower. We can talk about this at home." "We are talking about it now, Mark," I said, locking eyes with my husband. The man I had loved. The man I had struggled for 4 years to build a family with. Because the unemployment was not the crime. The crime was how you chose to fund their lifestyle. I clicked a remote control in my hand. The image on the projector screen changed. The screen now displayed a massive, highlighted bank statement. It was a joint savings account. The account names listed at the top were Mark Miller and Susan Miller. And directly in the center of the screen, highlighted in glaring yellow, was a wire transfer confirmation for $200,000. The recipient of the wire transfer was listed as Miller Holdings, LLC. A collective gasp echoed through the ballroom. 100 people stared at the undeniable proof of a massive financial transaction. 5 months ago, I narrated, my voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. When Greg realized he could no longer afford the leases on his luxury cars or the mortgage on their house, he did not get a job. He went to his mother-in-law, Susan, and my husband, Mark. He pitched them a fake, unregulated overseas crypto investment. Mark covered his face with his hands, letting out a low, pathetic groan. He sank back into his chair, physically collapsing under the weight of his exposure. Mark and Susan, I continued, pointing directly at the two of them, secretly drained a $200,000 legacy savings account, an account that Mark explicitly promised me was an untouched college fund for our daughter, Lily. They wired the money to Greg's shell company without telling me. They stole my daughter's future to fund Chloe's fake, influencer lifestyle. The ballroom erupted. Greg's father stood up, his face purple with rage, turning on his son. "You told me Vanguard sent you to a private equity firm. You told me you were managing institutional wealth. You stole $200,000 from your own family. It was an investment," Greg shouted back, his voice cracking, trying desperately to salvage a shred of dignity. "The market crashed. It wasn't my fault. Susan authorized the wire. I authorized it because you said it was guaranteed." Susan shrieked, instantly turning on her son-in-law to save herself. The toxic alliance was fracturing in real time. "You told me it would triple in value. You stole from me, you greasy little con artist. You knew he was unemployed, Susan," I interjected, slicing through her hysterical defense. "You knew he could not pay the vendor deposits for this very baby shower. You paid the caterer, the venue, and the florist yourself, and you emailed me asking to keep it a secret to protect his ego." I clicked the remote one final time. The screen changed to display the email Susan had sent me, explicitly admitting she was secretly covering Greg's bounced credit cards. Susan stared at her own words projected 10 feet high. The undeniable proof of her complicity was glaring down at her. She had no defense. She had no way to spin the narrative. She looked around the room, making eye contact with her wealthy, judgmental country club friends who were staring at her with absolute, undisguised disgust. The matriarch who had spent her entire life controlling the optics of her family was entirely, publicly ruined. Chloe, realizing that the source of her luxury lifestyle was permanently destroyed, burst into loud, theatrical, heaving sobs. She sank back into the peacock chair, covering her face. "My baby's shower," Chloe wailed, sounding exactly like a spoiled toddler whose toy had been taken away. "You ruined my baby shower. You planned this just to hurt me." I walked over to the peacock chair. I stood directly in front of her, looking down at the woman who had intentionally hijacked the most vulnerable moment of my life. "I did not ruin your shower, Chloe," I said quietly, my voice dropping so only she and the front row could hear. "I just provided the entertainment. You wanted a luxury influencer-style event. You wanted everyone to look at you. Well, they are looking." I turned my attention to Mark. My husband was sitting in the front row, completely paralyzed, staring at the floor. He had sacrificed his marriage, his daughter's college fund, and his integrity, all because he was too cowardly to stand up to his mother and his sister. "Mark," I said. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, filled with tears. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday morning," I informed him, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "My lawyer has already secured an emergency freeze on all of our joint assets. Because you committed marital fraud by secretly wiring $200,000 to an unregistered shell company, you have forfeited any claim to the equity in our home." I am taking full custody of Lily. Val, please, Mark begged, reaching a hand out toward me. Please, I am so sorry. I was just trying to help my sister. My mom pressured me. You know how she gets. I will pay the money back. I will work 3 jobs. Just do not leave me. You did not just help your sister, Mark, I replied, stepping back so he could not touch me. You stole from your daughter. You lied to my face for 5 months. And you sat in a velvet chair at my baby's shower and smiled while Chloe hijacked the celebration of the child you supposedly love. I looked at the entire family, Mark, Susan, Chloe, and Greg, sitting in the wreckage of their lies. You are a family built entirely on fraud, I said, and I am officially resigning as your event coordinator. I dropped the microphone. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud, piercing screech of feedback. I did not wait to watch the rest of the fallout. I turned my back on the stage, walked down the center aisle of the ballroom, and headed toward the exit. The guests, utterly shocked into silence, parted ways to let me pass. As I walked by the back row, Greg's former boss from Vanguard Capital caught my eye and gave me a slow, respectful nod. I walked out the heavy glass doors of the country club, stepped into the bright afternoon sun, and got into my car. I drove home, packed a suitcase, picked up my daughter from my best friend Sarah's house, and drove to a luxury hotel suite I had booked for the week. The aftermath of the baby shower was a catastrophic, inescapable legal demolition. When you expose a $200,000 fraudulent wire transfer in front of 100 witnesses, including corporate executives and wealthy investors, the consequences are immediate. Greg's former boss tipped off the Securities and Exchange Commission about the unauthorized crypto LLC. Because Greg had used his former corporate credentials to solicit the funds from Mark and Susan, he was formally indicted for wire fraud. He is currently awaiting trial and facing significant federal prison time. Chloe, faced with a husband going to prison and absolutely zero income, was forced to sell her luxury cars, her designer bags, and move out of her leased house. She gave birth to her son while living in the cramped spare bedroom of Susan's house. Susan was entirely ostracized from her country club's social circle. The public humiliation of the baby shower, combined with the loss of the $200,000 she wired to Greg, fractured her marriage to Mark's father. As for Mark, the divorce was brutal and fast. My lawyer, a ruthless woman who specialized in asset recovery, used the projected bank statements and the email evidence to annihilate him in court. The judge ruled that Mark's secret transfer constituted a gross dissipation of marital assets. Mark was ordered to reimburse my half of the stolen college fund directly from his own retirement accounts. I was awarded sole ownership of our home, primary physical custody of Lily, and substantial child support. Mark lost his family, his house, his savings, and his daughter, all because he could not say no to his mother. Last I heard, he was renting a small apartment near Susan's house, working overtime to pay off his legal debts, completely isolated from the life we had built together. I, on the other hand, thrived. I took the reclaimed funds and opened a secure, untouchable trust account for Lily's education. I sold the house I shared with Mark and purchased a beautiful, modern home in a quiet, safe neighborhood, far away from his toxic family. I received a promotion at my firm, becoming the director of global events. My life is incredibly peaceful. My home is filled with laughter, honesty, and the absolute certainty that my daughter will grow up knowing the value of a boundary. People who attended the baby shower often ask me how I managed to keep my composure. They ask how I did not simply start screaming the moment I found out about the stolen college fund. I tell them the exact same thing I tell my junior event coordinators on their first day of training. When you discover a massive failure in the logistics of an event, panic does not fix the problem. Screaming does not secure the perimeter. If you want to successfully manage a disaster, you have to control the timing of the reveal. You do not confront a liar in private, where they can gaslight you, deny the evidence, and spin the narrative to make you look crazy. You gather the documents, you secure the venue, you invite their entire network, and you let them stand on a stage, bask in the spotlight, and smile at the audience right before you drop the screen behind them. That is my story. If you are listening to this, and you are dealing with a golden child who steals your joy, a mother-in-law who demands your submission, or a partner who funds their delusions behind your back. Do not cry. Do not throw a tantrum. Just start digging. Find the receipts. Trace the funds. Plan the event of a lifetime and wait for the perfect moment to hand them the microphone. If you have ever had to reclaim your own narrative, or if you believe in the absolute, undeniable power of a well-timed PowerPoint presentation, type the word projector in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for tuning in to Family Drama Files. Remember, your peace is not negotiable, and your dignity is a premium asset. Protect it fiercely. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.